The ruling People's National Movement, our government in Trinidad and Tobago, recently got themselves in quite a bit of a kerfuffle or some foot and mouth disease, where a lot of their politicians, a lot of their ministers, after the budget, when they were, trying to explain to the constituents and trying to break down the budget and make it more palatable to the people, when they were trying to do that, it seems like they did the opposite. They took a budget that many people already were upset with and angered people more with it. I would think that's a really bad showing for a politician, because I would presume that their job at that point in time was to go out to the population and make this budget work. That's your job as a politician. You are a representative of the people, and when you go out there to the people, you are to make what your political group, your political party, the decisions you all made, you are to make it make sense to the people. That's your job. Unfortunately, it didn't seem like they were very good at that job. Now, for quite a few of the videos last week, quite a few of the lives last week, we went through a lot of what went on there and some of the backlash against it. Now, recently, I saw that the Guardian reached out to a subject matter expert to really get a breakdown of exactly how some of these statements didn't make sense. And we'd be going through from why the whole idea of the chulha or the coal pot to somehow be a bastion against the difficult times that we have coming, why that idea is just not a well thought out idea, and going from that into, well, an apology based on some of those statements, and also some backstory to see if the grounding principle, the base assumption behind a lot of what is going on in this budget, a lot of the difficulty, a lot of what people are upset about in the budget that just passed, is the fact that the fuel prices are going to be rising again. And we'll see if part of the base assumption about these rising fuel prices is correct or incorrect. So we'll get into that. Right before we get into that, though, if you are viewing this video and you like it, make sure you hit that like button. If you don't like it, well, drop a comment and tell me what you think and why you don't like it exactly. Even if you like it, you can still drop a comment also. The comments do help and the likes help also. If you are not subscribed to this channel, please do so. And if you are interested also in learning some more, this channel is brought to you by Mindful Education over there on Instagram. If you are interested in some pod classes, pod style learning, starting from the preschool ages straight up till CXC, do go and follow us over there on Instagram, mindful_education, and register if you are so interested. All right, so we're getting into some subject matter expertise dealing with coal pots, and the Guardian went all the way to Tanti Shanti to get an answer to this question. Chulha Queen Shanti takes on Scotland. Coal pot will mash up people living. It's better all your couples buy 2 concrete blocks, carry it home and get some firewood and cook your food on that if you can't buy a stove. All the wives go keep their husbands and all the husbands go keep their wives. That coal pot would mash up a living. I will tell anybody that. Popular Chulha Queen Shanti Ramsamudge said the frustration of trying to prepare meals on a coal pot can lead to pulling and tugging in marriages. Now, Tanti Shanti out there in South is giving marriage advice to the young people. She's saying, listen, if you are a couple, if you are a young couple out there, this whole talk about coal pots will mash up good living. The meals will not be coming on time. Now, I appreciate that Tanti is unreservedly leaning into the gender norms, the traditional side of gender belief and what you believe different genders are to do. And any one of you taking in enough of my content know I have an appreciation to some of that older tradition. I think sometimes we too quickly and easily do away with it. But yes, Tanti is leaning fully into that. She was responding to Port of Spain South MP Keith Scotland's recent suggestion that people can utilize a coal pot to cook their meals if they cannot afford cooking gas. But Ramsamudge took Scotland to task for his statement. Scotland, this is Shanti. I saying it in big. Now listen. If you are a Trinidadian, you would appreciate that. Just the phrase saying it in big comes with some weight behind it. If you know, you know. You know that saying it in big comes with some weight behind it. I saying it in big, go and apologize to the people. Me ain't afraid to tell you. I saying it in the public and I saying it big. This, pointing to a coal pot, is a waste of time. Now, the irony of her calling a coal pot a waste of time is that Tanti makes some money by selling those very same coal pots. So she's not doing this necessarily to her own benefit per se. You big enough to apologize. You up there so you would not know. But who in here would feel the heat? You are welcome to come by Shanti anytime. We go bubble a pot to show them you make a mistake in what you said. I appreciate that she refers to herself in the third person. That's when you're at a certain caliber. Ramsamuch said that Scotland's statement displayed a sense of ignorance and showed just how out of touch he was with reality. She believes that either the MP spoke without thinking, the words just fly out of his mouth, or that he has no experience in using a coal pot. Urging people to not heed Scotland's poor advice, Ramsamuch said, think before you act. Delivering his contribution to the budget debate on October 1st in Parliament, Scotland suggested that people utilize a coal pot, as he does for cooking. And this is a quote, this is quoting from his statements for those of us who may not know it. You want the government to come and buy gas? We can't do that. We provide the food, Madam Speaker. I still have a coal pot, you know, where I put my coals and I roast my breadfruit. So if you don't have that, go back till such a time until you can afford the gas, but don't come and blame you not having gas on the government, Scotland said. Strict words. Scotland, an attorney, also said he intended to ride his bike to the court to save fuel and burn fat. At a Laboratory Superior home on Wednesday, Ramsamuch 57 set out to prove Scotland wrong. As she said, in this day and age, using a coal pot would be uneconomical, messy, and frustrating. She invited the Sunday Guardian into her home to show the headache and stress someone would have to endure to cook a complete meal on a coal pot for their family. Coal pots come in a variety of sizes and are sold between $475 and $799. All right, that's already not very cheap. A two-burner tabletop stove, meanwhile, ranges from $250 to $999. So, the bottom range of the two-burner gas stove is cheaper than the coal pot. Just by the way, economically, it might make more sense to go out there and get a cheap gas stove. If they cannot afford a stove, Ramsamuch said they can invest in a chulha fireside for $100, which cooks faster than a stove and a coal pot. All right, so if you're looking in this picture here with Tanti Shanti, you could see the coal pot is what she is putting the coals over. The chulha is this to the side here, which is a structure built around the fireside. Now, the chulha is different from the coal pot, and she is suggesting that if you want something, go with the fireside. The coal pot is too much stress. She recalled that as a child, she saw her mother using a coal pot for roasting cornfish, melon, pepper, and tomatoes. But this was done only when they had family gatherings and limes. Acknowledging the coal pot is a rich part of the Caribbean's heritage and history, Ramsamuch said today it is seldom used by families or the younger generation. It was a fixture from at least the 18th century right up until gas stoves became available after the 1950s. Now, this in and of itself tells you something. If it died out when the gas stoves became available, it already tells that it's not really very useful as compared to the gas stove. But Tanti Shanti went on. I telling you from experience, if my husband brings home a coal pot for me to use, I will throw it away. That is the most frustrating thing I ever see in my life. I know about coal pots, chulhas, and stoves. I use them all, and the coal pot is the most frustrating thing to cook on, the mother of four said. Now, she went on to demonstrate exactly why the coal pot is so frustrating. Demonstrating how time-consuming it was to cook on a coal pot, Ramsamuch took 45 minutes to light some charcoals. 45 minutes. Another hour was spent boiling a pound of rice. The fireside cooks the rice in 10 minutes. On a gas stove, it takes 20 minutes, she said. Every 5 minutes, Ramsamooch had to either blow air into a small length of galvanized pipe called a pukni or fan the flames of the charcoal using a piece of cardboard. Because if you don't do that, the coal's out. And if the coal's out, then you have to spend that time lighting it again. The coal pot isn't exactly a very easy thing to use. When she was done cooking the rice, Ramsamooch's hands were blackened with charcoals. Her cast iron pot was covered in soot, and the ashes were blowing everywhere. Look at the mess this coal pot causing. Now I have to go and clean this pot. That is another set of work. To cook 2 additional dishes on a coal pot, such as dal and yard fowl, Ramsamooch said it might take between 4 and 6 hours. For a woman, as I said, she's leaning heavily into that gender, into those traditional gender norms and gender stereotypes. For a woman to spend hours slaving behind a coal pot is punishment, especially if she has to wash clothes, clean the house, and attend to her children, Ramsamooch says. Preach that traditional, preach those traditional gender roles, Tanti Shanti. Comparing the cost of a bag of charcoals to a cylinder of gas, Ramsamooch said there was a big difference. A 20-pound tank of LPG gas costs delivered to your home $28. This can last between 2 and 3 weeks according to how much you're cooking. With a 6-pound bag of charcoals, which costs $45, you might only cook 2 meals. And I said this during the live when we went through some of this already. The price difference between charcoal and the LPG gas is such as the LPG gas is still very much more economic than charcoal. 1 bag of $45 charcoal is going to give you possibly 2 meals, while you buy 2 tanks of gas for $45, you'd be cooking for nearly 2 months, especially if you're cooking less than usual, especially in our modern generation where, we're not out there cooking multiple meals per day. Well, let me not speak for everyone. Some of us aren't out there cooking multiple meals per day. Now, Mr. Scotland, to his credit, he took a lot of this criticism, he took it reasonably and began apologizing for it. MP Scotland, hurt and desperately sorry. Port of Spain South MP Keith Scotland is desperately sorry for his coal pot and bike statement and has apologized to the country and his constituents. I am hurt by the comments. It was not my intention to belittle or demean anybody, especially the people of Port of Spain South, he said as he issued the apology 1 week later yesterday. Now, if you read this article over there in the Sunday Express, he did apologize, a reasonably good apology. But to me, the fact of what this tells is already out there. As the subject matter expert, Tanti Shanti, went out and explained, it already shows some disconnect the MP is having. It shows that he obviously doesn't understand the economics of cooking. He doesn't understand how exactly is it possible to save some money. I spoke about this during the live. When you look at what many of these MPs and politicians said during this time, what that is telling us is they racked their brain, they searched their mind, trying to figure out ways that normal people, everyday people, the working class, the middle class people, ways in which they could save money. And they could not think of one reasonable way that the working class people could have saved money. At least this MP didn't say any. And that says, it already says some disconnect. Now, I give you credit for apologizing. Apologies are good. And, well, for what that is worth, I suppose many people may accept the apology. But the fact of the matter being that it was revealed your disconnect with the general population, the apology does not change that. Your disconnect is already shown. Scotland, an attorney, was subjected to an avalanche of memes on social media, caustic criticism on TikTok after he suggested people use coal pots for cooking if they can't afford gas. Scotland said, I go back to the root cause, the hurt and the disquiet. I want to say again that I am desperately sorry. It was never my intention to hurt people. I don't want to justify, but to clarify my statements. The comments were made by in a particular context. Now, I've heard him say this and Shamfa Kojo say this also, that there was a context to their statement, and in understanding the context of their statement, then you may understand what they meant better. And maybe, but I think even with the context, it still shows a disconnect. The context doesn't show a better connection between the people. Just the fact that you said what you said in the manner that you said it at the time that you said it already shows the disconnect, context or not. Scotland said there is a certain discipline that I try to adopt. I want to reiterate unequivocally that I apologize. It's a matter of clarification and not justification. He went on over and over. He said that over and over. I understand the hurt. I understand the anxiety. It's not just me. I did not ignore the penetration of hurt and anxiety. I must own full credit of what was spawned in the public domain. And he's an attorney, and you can see some of that lawyer language coming out there in his apology. I think, though, that maybe he should have consulted some of that lawyer vocabulary before he said what he said, and understand just how people may be able to foresee how people would be seeing this, even with your context added. He added, if it was taken in that way, I want to say to the country and the people of Port of Spain South that it is not what I am about. I have listened. I saw every meme. My children explained it. I always encourage them to be caring. I have taken it in stride. On a lighter note, Scotland paid kudos to people's creativity. I do want to say, however, that having looked at the memes and TikToks, the creativity of our people is alive and well. Well said, well said. And I must admit that, some people lament the way Trinidadians seem to take so many things as jokes. And okay, I understand that there's a time for being serious and not everything is necessarily a joke. But I do appreciate the way, the creativity and humor that Trinidadians seem to approach so many things with. I think it actually benefits us and allows us to take much of the difficulty of life and take it in stride. I don't think that's something that we should change. I like that part of us, to be very honest. Now, to get to the context of what he was saying in his budget contribution in Parliament, now, we already heard the crux of what he said. Let's see if there's some surrounding context that could make this make more sense. In his budget contribution in Parliament on October 1st, Scotland said he intends to ride his bicycle to court in order to save fuel and burn fat. He went further to suggest people utilize a coal pot for cooking. Scotland said the country's resources, as with the management of a household, have to be spread across and reasoned. Yes, the fuel prices are tough on the population. We understand it. Every time someone comes up with an alternative, there is hue and cry on Twitter, on Facebook, he said. He said leaving home earlier and carpooling are just some suggestions to deal with fuel prices. I have a suggestion for me. In order to lose weight, I will ride to court. I will take a bike in order to save fuel. That's my solution, he said. Now, I understand this as the context. The context he is trying to point out is that he is not necessarily telling the population that they have to do this. He was saying as for himself what solutions might be, and saying that, as the population, when you see these more difficult times coming, what is needed is not just the complaints and the hue and the cries on social media as he framed it, but suggestions of alternatives. And for him, he was suggesting these alternatives. He has a coal pot. He might use that coal pot. He will use a bike and get the exercise, etc., etc., etc. And I understand that in the context he was speaking of, it's just alternatives he's suggesting. However, you are also the person that is creating the situation, or at least you can be viewed as part of the group of people that are creating the situation that requires these alternatives. So you shouldn't be the one to come and tell me about the alternative suggestions. I am finding that you're the one creating the difficult times in the first place. It seems kind of insulting that you're creating the difficulty and then, not insulting me, but buffing me, upgrading me, telling me in stern words that maybe I should be looking at the alternatives instead of complaining about the more difficult times that I'm going to experience. even with the context, as I said, these statements still show that disconnect between the people and those that are ruling them. Now, as I went through during the live, Minister Al-Rawi, MP Al-Rawi, he had his original statement. It seemed like he saw already some of the flack that his compatriots were taking, and he decided that, you know what, let me approach this with more political charm, and he did that same thing. And I think a lot of it has more to do with that, the how you see what you see, and not just what you see. Now, the base assumption in a lot of this has to do with the fuel subsidy and what the fuel subsidy is there for. Now, one of our opposition speakers, one of the people that raise their voices in opposition regularly, he came out to go at that base assumption in the first place that the government was speaking about. Abdullah, fuel subsidy creating dependence, a false narrative. With the issue of the fuel subsidy once more in the spotlight following last week Monday's budget, Movement for Social Justice MSJ political leader David Abdullah said a low fuel price was a concept from Trinidad and Tobago's first Prime Minister, Dr. Eric Williams, to ensure every citizen benefited from this country being an oil producer. Speaking on a conference on Sunday, Abdullah stated the narrative that the fuel subsidy is creating dependency is false, and added the MSJ's opposition to the increase in fuel prices. Now, I understand this. He went back to the history of when this fuel subsidy came to be. From the first prime minister, the prime minister that was in charge of us getting our independence. Some call him the father of the nation, Dr. Eric Williams. And Mr. Abdullah is saying that the original intent of this fuel subsidy was to, as it will, share with the population the benefit of us being an oil producer. Because especially back in those days, the oil production would have been done by multinational, international corporations, and the profits could be had for the regular, everyday citizen to feel. And okay, the government is taking some royalty, they're taking the taxes from the oil production, and they're saying, okay, we're going to spend this on the population. But still, that might be something a little more difficult to experience. If you want the population to feel the direct impact of us being oil producers and feel it on their lives, well, that was something that was done. And this isn't something only segregated to Trinidad and Tobago. Many oil producing countries do that very same thing. So especially those Arabian countries, those Middle Eastern countries, the fuel prices are very cheap there. And I understand that argument. I've always said that the argument about fuel subsidy and whether it's a good or a bad thing to take it off is something that is debatable, at least to me, because it's just a matter of opportunity costs. Where best can we spend that money? I understand fully what Mr. Abdullah is saying, and I am very sympathetic to that view. I kind of share that view. It's something that every person in our population could kind of directly feel the benefit from. Our country has natural resources, and because of those natural resources, the government works a subsidy into being so that at the pumps every day when we go to buy fuel, it's at such a low cost, we can feel that ease in our life. But maybe the government has determined that it isn't best for us to spend this extra money, this how much of $1 billion per year, in benefiting people in their transport to and fro. The government is going to take that money and put it into another area. My problem with that is I don't really trust government spending in the first place. The subsidy was or is a way for the government to somewhat directly give money to the population. It's a more direct payment, and I don't think that the cheaper fuel would have made people necessarily go fill up their tanks and drive in a circle and just waste the fuel. We would use the fuel for the uses of our everyday lives. People were using that cheaper fuel to go visit family, to go on family vacations, to go on dates, to go on outings. They were using that for jobs, for taxi driving, for to give someone a ride here and there. That money, that how much of $1 billion that was being spent by the country was being used by the population to benefit the population. Do we think that the government holding that money back from the fuel subsidy is going to benefit the population more in whatever other area they're going to spend that money? I think there is a good debate to be had there. Maybe I would like, possibly, if it were possible, to sit down with someone in the government, maybe the Prime Minister, Minister of Energy, and find out, okay, how much was being spent? I know these numbers were said. How much was being spent on the fuel subsidy? How much we are going to save now? Let's say it's $2 billion. And show me that $2 billion that would have been otherwise spent on the fuel subsidy. Show me where it's going now. What is the government going to use that extra money for now? I would be curious to know. And I wonder if the government could itemize where that 2 billion, where how much ever, I'm not sure about the number and I haven't looked it up, where how much ever extra was going to be spent on the fuel subsidy. If the government can itemize clearly for the population and say, okay, the money that would have been spent on the fuel subsidy is now being spent on rental for a building in order to house one of the departments that we're going to split the HDC into. It's going to be used as money and resources to build some project in some area. And if they were able to itemize the alternative uses of that money, if the population would agree with it, if the population would say, okay, I will sacrifice my extra family outing, I will sacrifice going to pick up my child every day from school and, allow them to travel or you use public transport. I will sacrifice those things in order for whatever the alternatives the government has proposed. I wonder. Tell me what you think. Do you think that you would prefer the alternatives the government has proposed, or would you prefer cheaper fuel and use that money in your own savings? Tell me what you think. That's all I have for now. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained, and I will see you in the next video.